So pelleted seed is something that is not actually new, but to the home gardener it is. And so we're going to look at the whys and the wherefores of using pelleted seed and look at advantages and disadvantages of it. Everything's not always positive, as I'm sure all of you have known. So today we're going to talk about the history of pelleted seed and explain the reasons why pelleted seed was developed. We're going to compare the advantages and the disadvantages of pelleted seed and identify some of the sources for purchasing the seed. So when I was investigating this, and I happen to like kind of strange things when it comes to gardening, I found that pelleted seed has really been used intermittently since World War I. Now, I know that for most of you thinks, wow, that's a really long time ago. Um, so this is a picture of an airplane that was actually being loaded up to go drop seed. This particular one was in Australia, but in the 40s, here in the US, they were looking at ways to reseed the range using helicopters and airplanes because frankly, it would be cost prohibitive to have to run a tractor over thousands and thousands of acres, especially when it's just rangeland. The seed companies also debated the use of the term coated or pelleted. Um, Typically to the industry, coated was a separate seed that was individually covered with a material. Pelleted, they thought of as something that was compressed into a pellet that had multiple seeds. It also had some type of a moisture retaining substance and a dry material. So here's a picture of the same type of seed that's pelleted and non-pelleted. The one on the left here is the pelleted seed. These are lettuce seeds, and the one on the right is non-pelleted. So this gives you a visual representation of just the difference in size, and we're going to get into why that is important in just a minute. Now, pelleted seed was actually developed about 90 years ago by Germain's. And Germain's is a British seed company, and they first developed it for cereal crops back in the 1930s, and then later for sugar beets. So we're going to get into why the sugar beet issue has played a real valuable part of why we have pelleted seed. Now, this was used typically in the European greenhouse industry, and commercial growers used pelleted seed starting in around in the 60s. But here in the US, pelleted seed use increased in California, which we all know is a huge producer of produce after the ban on the short-handled hoe. And we're going to talk more in depth about that. So this occurred in the mid-70s, but pelleted seed is pretty much widely available just about everywhere. Now, the short-handled hoe. American agriculture, as we know, has long been dependent on migrant farm labor. What growers found through research was that they thought if the workers used a regular size hoe that they would lean on the hoe and not be as productive. So they were forced to use a short handled hoe. It was called El Cortito, or the small one, or El Brazo Diablo, the devil's arm. And this was used for thinning and weeding lettuce. And here's the sugar beet fields in California in the early 1900s. So workers were forced to stoop or kneel for long hours in the field. And so workers felt that this was very exploitive work and that the conditions were pretty intolerable. If you think about going out and working in your garden today, after a few minutes, it's like, oh, my back hurts, I'm out of shape. But think of doing it for long hours, maybe 12, 13, 14 hours a day. Then you can see where it's going to become um, a source of irritation for you. This is a picture of the short-handled hoe. As you can see, it looks just like a regular garden hoe, except the handle is very short. There were only about 8 inches long for the handle, so you can tell that it was, you would have to be very close to the soil. Other research indicated that because the crops were planted relatively close together to help with weeding issues, a lot of this could have been done standing up. But as I said, the owners felt that the workers weren't going to be productive. Now, again, it was a conflict between the workers and the ag industry, and there started to develop campaigns to help outlaw the use of it in the 1975. This is what increased the demand for pelleted seed. The efforts were led by the United Farm Workers of America, and some of you may remember Cesar Chavez. He was very instrumental in bringing about the decision to have this tool banned. And California was the first state to ban the short-handled hoe. And here's some comments that I found about it. It was a unanimous ruling of the California Supreme Court that found that the tool was unsafe, given that it caused injury, which was either immediately or cumulative when used in the manner in which it was intended. Of course, it was intended that the worker had to bend over for long hours of the day. Once it was banned, the farm workers' back injuries decreased by 34%. Now, here's the interesting thing. Even though it was banned, farm workers were still often required to weed by hand for an additional 29 years. How was that allowed? So it wasn't until 2004, which is not that long ago, most forms of hand weeding were banned in California. So you could speculate that when they banned the hoe, they just found something else to require the workers to have to bend over or kneel for long periods of time. This is a picture of some farm workers in a field in California in 2021. These workers are picking strawberries, which if you've not done it, I'm sorry, you do have to bend over to pick the strawberries. And I know just from going through a field and at like a pick your own, after a little while, your back does hurt. And so can you imagine spending long hours like this? Especially for young people, it could be very, very debilitating. So what are pelleted seed anyway? They're typically normal seeds, but they have a special inner coating that's applied to them. So when we talk about inner, we're talking about something that's not going to be reactive. Typically, they used very small or irregular seed that were coated. They found that by doing this improved the planting, the spacing, and the germination rates. Also, just about anything can be pelleted, from vegetables to flowers to herbs. So my husband and I were having a debate about pelleted seed. And I said I liked it because I could take and make my own seed tape with it. I could place the seed exactly where I wanted it, and I wouldn't have to thin. And he commented, well, look on the back of the seed. It says to thin. Well, what I should have told him is, who is selling the seed? It's a seed company. Of course, they're going to want you to plant more seed, and you're going to thin, and then you'll require more seed. So for me, I think it's a smarter move to go ahead and be able to space your seeds out where you need them and not have to go back in and thin them. Now, here's a picture of some pelletized onion seed. Now, you'll see this little black dot up here. This little black dot is 3 millimeters in diameter. So now you can have a relationship of 3 millimeters to this. So these are about probably 3 millimeters. So again, you're probably wondering, okay, why? Why do this? Now, here's some seed that I had purchased. I wanted to have the identical thing. So this is cherry bell radishes on the left. These are pelletized. And here's the cherry bell that are not pelletized. Now, granted, the seeds don't look that small until you start planting them. And then they're the same color as the soil when you plant them in there. And if you drop them, well, goodness gracious, then you're going to have a whole bunch more. Now, I will point out a couple things while we're looking at this, the seed packets. These were $1.89. These are $2.69. This one will tell you how many seeds are in here, which was 300. The packet on the right did not give me a seed count number, but I would say it probably had close to the equivalence of the seed packet on the left. Now, like you saw the slide at the beginning, if you're going to be planting these things in the garden, it is much easier to see something that's bright red, bright pink, bright yellow, bright purple, lime green, any color other than the color of the soil. It'll be much easier for you to see it. So for commercial operations, here are some reasons why they wanted to develop pelletized seed. Protection from environmental conditions that often led to replanting. So if the ground was really moist and the seeds weren't pelletized, then they could rot, and then they would have to come back in and replant. Now, if anyone is in production agriculture, you know that's very expensive. I mean, just look at the price of fuel now and look at the cost of diesel, which most of our tractors run on. This also simplified seeding, especially if you were either using planes to drop your seed or mechanical seeders. Now, probably the oddest thing I'd ever heard, I went down to, it's Route 3 and Route 146. It's called Riverbend Rice. They produce and plant and grow Cahokia rice. It was actually developed at Louisiana State University in Louisiana. And they have gotten the rights to go ahead and raise it as Cahokia. What I thought was really interesting was when I was talking to the owner, and he told me that this one field, and they usually plant it dry, was always too wet to get into. So they would take a bag which holds about 2,500 pounds. They would soak the bag overnight in water. They would load it up in an airplane, and they would seed the field with rice using the airplane. So mechanical seeders, if you've ever used a little push behind seeder, you know they have plates in them that will drop a seed of a particular size every so often. So this was really smart for commercial growers. when you put the seed coating on, it made the seed drop through that mechanical seeder much more easily. Also, it had nutrient benefits because it would increase the oxygen availability to the seed. And this is something we're going to get into when we talk about treatments, pre-inoculation of legume seeds. So you're talking about your bean seeds and soybeans. A lot of the seed, and some of it you may be familiar with, like corn is often treated with a fungicide, cotton is treated with a fungicide. What this allowed was for the growers to be able to apply any type of fungicide in that directly to the seed instead of having to apply it onto the field. So of course, this is going to save a lot of money for the commercial grower. Now, for the home gardener, in my opinion, it reduces the loss from having to thin seed. It's definitely easy to handle, easy to see, and it's also protected from birds and rodents because they don't recognize it as something that's like food. Now, those seed coatings, in the earlier years, it was an obstacle for commercial growers to adopt it. What they found was that they had to have the seed coat be able to split open as soon as it was water hit it, and it needed to be able to get sufficient oxygen into that seed in order to start the process of germination. So coating densities have to be manufactured. So the seed coating either splits open or disintegrates on contact with water, and then the seed can absorb the water inside and start to germinate. So this was a big issue with widespread adoption of pelleted seed. Again, the coating material is typically an inert substance like clay or talc. They often have a binding agent like a glue, and the process allows the seeds to be uniformly increased in size and weight. So that makes use of a mechanical seeder much easier, and they're so much easier to plant. So what is the importance of pelleted seed to the seed industry? Well, you can tell by the big dollar signs, it's money. What the agricultural markets here and the horticultural markets here in the Western countries have found is, yeah, you can find pelleted seed anywhere. Now, these technologies are spreading to developing countries, but for 2020, the global market for pelleted seed was forecast to be $1.63 billion, and that's US money by 2020. But that's a lot of money. My brother had been sending seed and funds to this young man in Sierra Leone. And what he had told my brother was to purchase seed that was quality seed there was very, very, very expensive. So if you're pelletizing the seed, you can offer some protection right there for the seed. And we're going to get into a couple of the issues with that as well. Now, for the commercial growers, again, we're looking at uniformity of size, that added weight makes it much easier to use in a mechanical seeder. For root crops and bulb crops like onions, carrots, and parsnips, you're going to want everything spaced just so far apart so the roots will grow down, there's plenty enough room, you end up with a nice product. I spoke with one of the commercial growers at the farmer's market in Carbondale, he often brings sprouts and he grows lettuces. And he said that for the lettuces, he definitely uses the pelleted seed, that because the lettuce has to be a little bit more moist, he finds he has better production if he uses pelleted seed as opposed to not using it. With the sprouts, because he's only letting them grow for such a short amount of time, he doesn't need to use that type of seed. However, he's an organic grower, so he does purchase from like Johnny Seed, which is they do regular and organic seed. He also used it for this reason, for growing plugs. So it's much easier to use a hand seeder and place one seed per plug, where, you know, sometimes my fingers don't feel all those little tiny seeds. So it would be much easier with something you can see easier to have one seed per plug and not waste your seed. Seeds like lettuce are what they call primed. So before pelleting, they will go through a metabolic process to start the germination process. Then they stop it real quickly by pelletizing the seed. So the seed is already starting to grow. And once it hits water, it's going to take off. So those early steps of germination are completed before it's even planted. Again, if you're looking at this from a commercial grower standpoint, the sooner you can bring your crop to market, the better your prices are, because you will have them there before someone else does. So for this young man that has the lettuces and the sprouts, the sooner he can get his product into the farmer's market, he'll sell out right away. And then he usually makes more money than his competitors because he has a product they don't have yet. Now, this is what pelleted seed look like in a field. So if those seeds were brown, do you think you would be able to see them? Probably not. But because these are coated in probably a white clay, they're much more visible. And I granted this one's a little farther apart, but they're relatively uniform in the field. Now, here's another picture. So here's another picture. So this is out at San Luis Obispo in California. And here you can tell these seed are placed relatively the proper spacing apart. But here's the interesting thing about these, and these are onion seeds that you're seeing. These are lettuce seed. Those seeds are the field is gonna be flooded. Those seeds are not gonna be covered up. They won't need to. They will germinate once they're irrigated. So as soon as water hits them, they start growing. It's not like you have to, lightly cover them up. But again, here you're thinking about a whole field of lettuce. And I've lived in California and I've seen these fields and they seem like they go on forever. So again, you have a very limited time in order to make the most profit. You're going to want to get your seed out there, try to get it planted and up out of the ground before your competitor. So again, this with pelletized seed, it helps the commercial grower achieve at least that goal. Now, when we get to the native seed industry, our native seeds, some of those are very, very small, and it would really be nice to have some of those pelletized. But what they found when they went to the manufacturers was that the door was closed. They wanted to perform some tests on them and like test pelletizing some native seeds, and nobody would talk to them. So basically, the private seed companies owned it and they kept their recipes and the process secret, sort of like Colonel Sanders and Kentucky Fried Chicken. So what some researchers at the Center for Mine Site Restoration in Western Australia did was they spent 3 years reverse engineering all the coating materials, and they refined the technique for how you did it. And they published a protocol development tool for doing your own seed. They also produced a step-by-step guide on pelleting the seed with the materials and the equipment that you needed, and they made it available to anyone that could do it. It wasn't like a big deal. For us, it would probably be a big deal because I looked at some of that equipment and go, yeah, I don't have one of those and I don't know where I would put it. But here they took something that they felt should be available for everyone, and they figured out how to do it in a way that made it available to everyone. Now, before we had talked about treatments and how like the lettuce was primed, and we talked about the legumes like beans. So often the seeds have to be treated with a fungicide. So this will protect the seed from any mold that's in the soil. This is especially important for carrots and other types of seeds that are difficult, if not almost impossible to transplant. When you think of corn seed, of course, corn seed, you can see that one, but that one is also treated with a fungicide before it's planted. Some of them, and this is a little bit less common, are treated with insecticides. And it may be where we have insect pests that are a threat to the seeds before or right after they germinate. University of Georgia, the legumes like your beans and your seeds are sometimes treated with a nitrogen fixing bacteria. So this helps the plants and helps the seeds to convert nitrogen that's in the air to nitrogen compounds that the plants can use for growth. So again, it gives the plants and gives those seeds an advantage over some of the others. Now, when we look at treated and untreated seeds, now, these treatments may be necessary for planting outdoors. We all know we cannot really depend on a really perfect day to go out there, whether we're home gardeners or commercial producers, that the weather's going to be perfect. It seems like there's always a time when it's too wet, it's too dry, there's not enough moisture or an excess moisture. Especially if you have had a disease or insect issue in that particular field before. Maybe you don't have the option of moving that particular crop to a different field. Or maybe you're in a rotation cycle where this crop is supposed to go in this field at a certain time. So you may not have that option. Now, if they're untreated, there's no biological or chemical treatments applied to it. This would work if you're going to just start the seed indoors in sterile potting soil. Then it wouldn't make any difference whether the seeds were primed. That's okay. You would probably do well with them. But in the field setting, probably not. So what are some of the advantages and disadvantages? I mean, do you go, yeah, I want this, I want to try it, or no, I don't think so. I thought this was just an interesting picture because you got to see all of these different types of seed that are here. Now, some of the advantages, of pelleted seed, again, it's easier to handle. Now, Seed Dynamics, which is a company that does pelleted seeds, said that the weight is 10 to 40 times heavier than ordinary seed. So they're not going to blow away in the wind or even if you breathe on them. This is going to be an advantage if you have something that is very small. Onion seeds are very small. Lettuce seeds are small. So if you're planting them like we saw in the picture before where they were planting lettuce seed in the field and then they were going to flood it, and they're not covering up that little narrow trough that they were in, you're going to want something that's going to stay put. Because they're larger, if you drop the seed, you're liable to be able to see it. It's not like you drop it and then, oh, where did it go? The color coding makes it so much easier to see, especially for planting. Now, if you're a home gardener and you're wanting to plant a little flat, maybe it's one that has 72 cells in it, and you're wanting to go ahead and start some different, maybe different varieties of the same type of plant, like maybe lettuces, or you want to start some tomatoes, then by having the seed a different color, it's easier when you put them in the tray to separate them. Maybe you started planting them and then you got called away and then you forgot where you were. If you were just doing unpelleted seed, you wouldn't know where you ended. It's easy to get distracted sometimes. So this makes it to your advantage to do so. Also, again, spacing makes it easier to plant that seed at the proper spacing in a row. So if on the back of the seed packet, it says 4 inches apart, you can plant it 4 inches apart. And then if you have to space between the row, then you can go ahead and do that as well. Germination rates can be up to 50% faster. Again, if you're a commercial grower, this is exactly what you want to hear. If you're a homeowner and you want to plant a garden, you might want to hear this too, because maybe you're just really waiting for that first head of fresh lettuce and you can't wait to get it. Now, seeds can avoid some potential problems, like from soil crusting or weeds or soil-borne diseases. Again, it's going to depend on the type of seed that you have, whether that seed has been treated or not. It's also available for more types of seed. Again, flowers, vegetables, herbs, grasses, much nice variety of what you can do. Now, the other side of the coin is that there are some disadvantages. Now, Johnny's Seed, which is a seed producer, suggests that you only keep enough for 1 year. So they're saying that the shelf life is limited. They recommend that you only purchase enough for the current season. Like I showed you with the pictures of the seed packet, the cost is usually higher. If you are looking for the organic sources, sometimes they're a little bit limited, but I do have some resources for you at the end of the presentation that do have the organics. So that does help. And I'll tell you about the seed in a minute. Now, for us home gardeners, again, they're easy to see. Think of those lettuce seeds, those carrot seeds, the onion seeds. They're so small. Again, they're easier to handle because some of those seeds are small and irregular. And if you drop them, a lot of times you can't even find them because they're so small. And the seed coating is colored, so it's different colors for different crops. Again, that helps you to be able to easily differentiate between the crops that you're planting. If you're wanting to plant either several rows or several varieties in a tray or in a garden or in a field, you can see where you started, where you ended. If you want to mark them off so you'll know what variety it is, then you can do so and it'll make it so much easier. Here's the thing, pelleted seed have lots of seed in a packet. And it's usually more than most home gardeners would need, even if you plant it every 2 or 3 weeks later, unless you have a really large family or you like to donate food to local food pantries. You would have way too many seeds. So here's a picture I just took of this. Here's some of those radish seeds off to the left. And I think those were rosemary seeds off to the right. So you can see the radish seeds are nice and large and easy to see. Of course, I didn't hydrate these because I wanted you to be able to see them. These rosemary, if you could imagine how small it must be, because these don't look very big in those little pods, but then these are coated. So for one thing, you can see it, and another, just seeing how small the coated seed is makes you realize how small the actual seed would be. And again, would reinforce why you would like to use these. Now, I was telling you that they have flower and vegetable and herb seeds. These are some that I purchased. There's the rosemary seeds that are green. The cherry bell radish was red. And here is some butterfly flower, which is bright purple. So if you know, for this particular company, the purple was perennial, the vegetable was red, and the herb was green. Now, whether or not all of their seed are that color, I can't tell you because I didn't purchase a whole bunch of them. But again, you can look at the count. This butterfly flower has 200 seeds. The cherry bell, which was said before, has 300, and there's 150 seeds in the rosemary pack. I mean, that would be a lot of rosemary if you planted them and they all came up. Now, these are some final suggestions. You know, you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, I'm enthused about it, but what you could do is purchase a regular pack of seed and then look for a pack of seed for the same thing that's been pelleted, like the cherry bell radishes. Plant them side by side in your own garden and just have your own test plot. And you can put when you planted them, when did they germinate, what was the rate of germination, if you can keep track of the number of seeds that you planted, and write that information down. And then you can see if that has value to you, if it helped you to get your crop up and get your produce sooner than later. One thing, don't forget to label what you planted where and what row it's in. Maybe you could write it down in a journal, or you could use like spoons, like plastic spoons, and write the names on a plastic spoon with a Sharpie. You can also buy some inexpensive plant labels and you can use pencils on those, and then you can erase them and use them again. Be sure to take some detailed notes. You might even want to consider what were the planting conditions at the time you planted it. You know, maybe what the temperature was. If you have conducted a soil sample and done a soil test before planting, which is really important. Another thing would be a good idea is to share those results with other gardeners and people that you know that may raise gardens. tell them what worked for you, what didn't work for you. Often a word of mouth is the best advertisement anyone could ask for. Um, and purchase some different packs of pelleted seed and maybe share them with your neighbors or some of your friends and let them try them as well. Or if you purchased some and you've planted all that you want and you have extra seed, then let your neighbor or your friend have some, and again, encourage them to do the same thing you're doing. Now, I wanted to put this in that a reference to a product is not intended to be an endorsement of one brand over the other. It was simply what I could find. In the photographs of a commercial product or enterprise don't constitute an endorsement over other products or other enterprises that maybe we have not shown here. So I did want to clarify that. These are some local seed sources that I have seen pelleted seed at. So places like Lowe's, Rural Kings, Menards, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, True Value, Walmart, or pretty much wherever you have local seed sources. Now, these are some sources for pelleted seed. There's Johnny Seed, there's Seed Dynamics, and there's also Germain's Seed Technology. In this one, you can contact the US source for these. If you're looking at organic sources, these are some of the ones that I was able to find. West Coast Seed, Germain Seed, Johnny's does have regular and organic seeds. Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, and Seed Dynamics is also branching out into the organic field as well. These were some of the articles that I used to prepare this presentation. And here's the websites for a lot of the information that you may want to look at for yourself. I will take questions, but I wanted to show you something else. Now, I happen to like sesame seeds, and I like sesame seed cookies and sesame seed bread, but I never saw sesame seeds actually growing. So this is a farm in Texas, and this is what the stalk looks like that the sesame seeds grow on. And I thought it kind of reminded me a little bit of Columbine. So I just thought I would toss this one in just for something different. If you are interested in looking at some of our past Four Seasons gardening series, here is the website. We would like you to take this, use this code and do a brief survey for us. And here is my contact info, but I'm going to go back to the other slide if I can. So
thanks again.
Thank you.